talking about the idea of the chaloimus of Yosef. This is a man Shitas Kislev, part of Beshalom. But to explain part of Beshalom, he goes into Parshas Vayeshev about chaloimus of Yosef, that the cholom is about ani yeshena b'galusa. I am asleep in galus, v'libi eir, and my heart is awoke and wakened to Torah mitzvahs, and that's the whole idea of a dream. That the dream is that even when he finds himself out in the world after davening, he loses track of things, and he needs a mincha to help him get back into the situation. So that's like a dream where a person is shown two opposite things in the dream, but then we have to fix up the situation that in Golus it says, Hayinu kecholmim, we were like dreamers, and that is through being a poiser chaloimus, that Yosef interprets the dream for positive, and specifically the capability that Yosef was able to interpret dreams for the positive, and to make that Yosef is the shalit, that we said also earlier, that Yosef represents Klal Yisrael, Noya Katzoin Yosef. That's through the dreams of the bundling of the sheaves that bound down to him, and the sun, the moon, the 11 stars bowing down. As we will explain now, the significance of that in Avodas Hashem. So again, we're holding on page 5, Oishei, line 12. The Indian explanation of this matter is the Hinam Avur b'Torah or Parsha Shavuot. It's explained in Torah or in the Parsha of the week, meaning Parsha Vayeshev, when this mimer was said. The idea that he saw a dream of them bundling the sheaves of wheat within the field. It's about refining the sparks that fell down in the breaking of the vessels of Toy. Why does it have to do with ma'almin alumim? What does it have to do with making these sheaves? Because the simple meaning of ma'almin alumin is ketargumai, like the Targum says, ma'asrin esorin, that they are binding bundles. As we know, isur is from the word something that's bound, like the Alter Rebbe says in the beginning of Tanya, that something that's not kosher, it's called isur because it's bound up in klippah and cannot rise from there. Because we take these bundles, these sheaves, and we bind them. We collect many stalks, and we join them, and we tie them together in one bundle. These bundles of wheat is called an aluma. This means initially these stalks of wheat were separated one from another, and through this binding they become one. Not only that every one of them will remain in its place and in its own corner, and they shouldn't oppose each other. In other words, like this, there's the achdus can be just the lack of fighting and warring with each other. So you have the stalks of wheat, spread out, so they're not disturbing each other, if they would be able to disturb each other. But the idea of binding is taking them all together. It's more than just that there is no dispute, a disparity, and so on. It's they're joined. So this we said at the beginning that the Alter Rebbe says in Torah, it has to do with refining the sparks. So too, it's the idea of refining the sparks and elevating the sparks that fell down in the breaking of the vessels. Because the breaking of the vessels is also about things being all scattered. Like he explains, the shattering of the vessels, it's the idea that this separates into many parts. That's what happens when you break something. When something is whole, it's connected. You have a keli that's whole, it's connected. You drop a cup, it shatters. You have tens, hundreds of pieces, whatever it is. So he gives an example. What does that mean in the spiritual world concerning the world of Toyu? So we know letters are called kelim, and words are kelim for the light that's it communicates. So he says, for example, the word baruch, when their letters are combined in this word, so then in that word, when you have all the four letters of the word baruch combined, so then the idea that the word baruch contains is enclosed in it. That idea of baruch is a bracha, bracha is about drawing down. If you were to take these letters and separate them from each other, top of page Yud, the Beis is alone, the Reish is alone, the Vav, the Chav, each one is separate. So then all you see is just that individual letter. You don't see the idea of Baruch anymore. We don't see the topic and the idea of Bracha, which was there when the letters were combined. So the Rebbe says, when letters were together, it still even when it separates, there's always a remnant of its initial state when it was together. So the Rebbe says in the brackets on line 3, though it remains a particular mark, an impression from what happened before. Since this letter was once part of the combination of the word Baruch, so then it remains from it some type of mark and remnant. Just like we say in general, any type of holiness does not move from its initial place. It always remains. So something of the idea of Baruch is still stuck in the Beis and the Reish and the Vav and the Chav. It's explained in the Shviras HaKelim the Toyu. It's like if you had a keli, you had a cup that had wine in it, and the cup fell and shattered, there'll still be like droplets of wine that's like stuck and lying on different parts of the keli over there. So he says, so what do we mean that you don't see it at the bracha? But the Rebbe concludes, the end of the parentheses, line 6, the bracha part is not visible anymore. So the visibility, the revelation of the light of the concept of bracha in the word baruch is when all the letters are combined with each other. When they're separated, you don't see that idea. So he says in line 7, just like it's concerning the word baruch down here below. And any word down here below, that only when it's combined of all the different letters, then it houses, and it's a keli for the different ideas. So the same thing is when we have the concept of kelim above, which are also likened to words and letters. Where do we see that the words of Hashem have a like power and energy in it? The very famous pasuk in the brackets, because by the word of Hashem the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their hosts, through the utterance of there should be a rakia, became into being. Not just Yehi Rakia meant our physical Rakia down here, but wherever there's the concept of Rakia in the spiritual realms, wherever there's a concept of Shamayim in the spiritual realms, that was also created with the Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia, both the Shamayim of Oil Matikun, and not only the Shamayim of Oil Matikun, whatever aspect of Shamayim there's in the world of Toyu, also came about from the hierarchy that was said at the beginning of the creation of the world, and constantly is being revitalized through it, as we know. What happened in the world of Tayu? So you have the Kalim, you have the Oisius, you have the words. The shattering of the vessels mean that the all these words were divided into many parts in such a way that every letter is separated on its own. That's a general avodah of refining, purifying, and clarifying the sparks. What does that mean? In other words, the avodah that Arizal and Chassidus always talks about, that we do our avodah in this world, we are elevating the sparks. To return them from their separation, to their combination, the way they were initially, to rejoin them. It's like, again, you had a shattered vessel, put it back together again, glue it back together again. That's our job. And then the oir that's supposed to reside in that shattered word, like we said, the word baruch, so then it will return over there. The Rebbe says in the parentheses, bedugmas inyan hacholim, similar to the idea of a dream. So what exactly does the Rebbe mean about similar to the concept of a dream? So let's move down the page to footnote 53. 53, he says, L'chura kavana, seemingly the intention of the Rebbe in the Pnim, that says that the ingathering and collecting of all the broken, shattered vessels to return them to their original state of unity. What does it mean that it has to do with a cholam? What does it mean it has to do with a dream? So the idea of the dream has to do shagam b'cholam yesh beis inyanim nefrodim v'hafkin. Also in a dream, there are two separate things and opposite things. That's what we say. A dream is made up of opposites. You could see things that are opposites of each other in a dream. The fact that in a dream opposites come together, that's only imagination. But in truth, they are separated and distant one from another. But the interpretation of a dream, the explanation of the dream, it's to elevate them and return them to their source above. Shesham heim mechubarim yichadim, that over there in their source they were originally joined together. They were as one, and the publisher points out to footnote 38 that in Torah Oir, that's brought down footnote 38, it says that really, even though a dream down here looks so crazy and has all these extremes and things that don't fit together, really the dream comes from a very, very high level. It comes from the level of Igulim Makif, that in Igulim and Makif there's no above and there's no below. Everything is equal. There's no separation. And that is why in a dream it looks crazy. It looks opposite. But when Mashiach comes, which is connected, similar to the idea of the Pisrei Nacholim, the interpretation of a dream, it's going to be revealed, this high level of the dream, what it really was about, the utmost level. Anyway, let's get back to the text. Again, we're holding on the 6th page, page Yud, line 16. So now, once we said that the idea of the Shviras HaKelim L'Toyu and our Birur HaNitzutzos is we have to rejoin and put back together the sparks that were scattered. That's just like we started saying at the beginning about the dream of Yosef, about the bundling of the sheaves, where you take the disparate pieces of wheat and so on, and you put it together. So he says in line 16, this is what it's called in the expression, in the language of the pasuk, that they are bundling sheaves. Here the Rebbe adds another point. You cannot just put together these separate stalks of wheat on its own, which spiritually represents putting together all the sparks that have fallen in and through the Shviras HaKelim of Tayu. You need to first change them. And then, to be able to join every single stalk with another single stalk, you need to make a change in the single stalk, and then eventually to join and connect one more stalk and one more piece of wheat with its fellow to be one. The idea of ma'almim alumim is called an avoida. Meloshen ibud oiris, just like working on hides, to tan them and to turn them into parchment and so on, and to turn them into something useful like leather or parchment. That is something that's called ibud because it involves avoida work. So it's a matter that comes in the way of toil and effort. Since, just like when you tan the hide, you have to change the nature and the existence of it that was before the beginning of the avodah. So at the beginning of the avodah, you had the just a coarse animal skin, and now you've turned it into fine leather, you turned it into parchment, etc., etc. The same thing, to be able to connect and reconnect the fallen and shattered kelim of Tayu and to elevate those nitzoitzes, one needs to rework the nature of them. In other words, the shattering is not just something that's like happenstance. It's indicative that the very nature of the item, of the thing itself, has been changed and is in such a way that it was, because of that, it was a state of being shattered and separated. Now we need to change this from that state, and we have to make it in a different state so that now it's able to unshatter. It's able to have the unity. So he says in line 24, back to the dream that Yosef was seeing, certainly it says we are bundling sheaves within this field. This means externally, it's something that's a field, which shows that it's external to Torah mitzvahs. It's external of where there's a human dwelling. It's external to Gadol Havaya Be'ir Elokeinu, that the city of Hashem where godliness is revealed, like the Rebbe speaks in the in the Anila Doidim Amar. Yet, even though they're in the field, through bundling the sheaves within the field, that's the general service and the fulfillment of the Eibishter's will through Torah mitzvahs. So you're dealing with field matters, you're dealing with physical objects, and there you are reconnecting it. Then it's the effect that should be recognizable in the field, that it's a field that Hashem benched. It says the Avis, each one called the place of the Migdash and the base of Migdash by a different thing. Yaakov called it a bayis, Avram called it a har, as in Har Meriah. Yitzchak called it a field. What does that mean? Why would he call the Migdash by the word field? Because that's the whole point. The point is to take the field and to transform it into a holy place. We transform, we make the world, which is symbolized by the idea of a field, we make it a dir leis baruch, a home for the Eibishter above. Top of page Aleph, Ois Vav. Noise of all the inyan. The Ma'al Malum B'Soich HaSod, in addition to the idea that we are bundling sheaves within the field, Yesh Negama Inyan, the Kama Al-Masi Shal Yosef. That's the first part of the dream. They were bundling the sheaves. Then there's another step. The step of like the main point of the dream. That they were bundling sheaves, that's just like almost like only an introduction. The main thing is that the sheaf and the bundle of Yosef arose, v'gam nitzava, and it stood fast. V'hinis isuben alu moisechem, and your bundles, the bundles of the rest of the Shvatim, encircled it, and they bow down to my bundle. What's the significance of that? Once we already have the avodah of collecting the sparks that fell, etc., what is this particular avodah of the bowing down of the sheaves? It says in line 4, the idea behind this is, let's explain at length in Torah, the refinement of the bundling sheaves within the field. What we spoke about in the previous ice, before they even bow down, it's the opposite of the separation that was caused by Toyu. So us with our Torah mitzvahs, we are bundling them together. We are making them the opposite of Pirud. That's only the first stage in our avodah. Rak bit layesh. That's only bit layesh, the first step. Afterwards we come to a second birur, a higher elevation of the sparks. It's the idea of bitl mitzias. This occurs through the fact that they bow down to my bundle. To the bundle of Yosef. So what's the idea behind this? Yosef was on a higher level than the rest of the Shvatim. Therefore it says, Eila told us Yaakov Yosef. These are the offspring of Yaakov, which is Yosef. Meaning, the Chazal say, what does that mean? These are the offsprings of Yaakov Yosef. He had a whole bunch of other children. Why is he called it Yosef are his offspring? So we learn out from that Yosef was a continuation of what Yaakov was about. So more so than the rest of the Shvatim. So he was higher than the Shvatim, just like Yaakov was higher than the Shvatim. And this expressed itself in the fact V'chol ma she'ira li Yaakov ira li Yosef. Everything that occurred to Yaakov occurred to Yosef. So that alone already sets Yosef apart and makes him higher than the rest of the Shvatim. Even more so, Yosef was not just higher than the rest of the Shvatim because he was like Yaakov and a continuation of Yaakov, but there are aspects in which Yosef is even higher than Yaakov. He says in the brackets on line 13, until there are such things that Yosef was even higher than Yaakov. Like we find Yaakov also in Yonim B'derech when Yaakov did things in the natural realm. To be able to deal with Lavan's trickery, so we had to use the carving out of the staffs to be able to bring the sticks, to be able to bring the different sheep to the appropriate type of the designs on their coloring and so on. So he used natural means to be able to overcome Lavan's trickery. So that was appropriate for his level, and that was okay to use the natural world to overcome his attackers and etc. Mash'enkin Yosef as opposed to Yosef when he relied on the Sarah Mashkin, when he asked the butler to remember him to Pari when he gets out of prison. So it says he was punished on this and he had to sit another 2 extra years in prison because instead of relying on Hashem, he relied on a human being. How's that different than Yaakov? Yaakov relied on physical things, But Yosef was at such a higher level that he should have not relied even on any type of physical intervention. He shouldn't have asked the Sarah Mashkin, Baruch B'Teres Chaim, like it's explained at length in Teres Chaim and Mittel Rebbe. So essentially, not only was Yosef higher than the Shvatim because he was a continuation of Yaakov, or he was identical to Yaakov, in some regards, he was even higher than Yaakov, and therefore, for sure, above and beyond the Shvatim.